Hello, Chris here with Dan, and we are going to talk about Sherlock because we've just watched the final episode of season 3. So don't watch this if you haven't seen it because we're going to go into spoilers. But Dan,
we'd ruin it.
But Dan, what did you think of that episode?
I thought that was a really, really great conclusion to season 3. And I've been reviewing the episodes for the site, and not everyone's been on board with what I said of the episodes, but I do feel like this episode shows what the show maybe was more like in the first couple of seasons. I think it had a lot of momentum, it had a lot of character stuff, but it was also mixed with plot, which is what I've kind of been yearning for. And I think it serviced the two strands of the show. And it's not that I wanted, per se, mystery, where it's all revealed in the final 20 minutes, which this episode didn't do, but it was still that sense of intrigue that I think the first two episodes kind of lacked, as it kind of set stuff in motion.
Yeah, it was gripping, wasn't it? Because we watched it together, and I felt like we were both on the edge of our seats for quite long periods. You didn't know where it was going. There were a couple of twists I didn't see coming.
And also, unlike the first two episodes, a really strong antagonist.
Which is so important.
And after Moriarty, that wasn't easy to fill, but Magnuson was very different, but very it's kind of horrible. And that's kind of what they played up very early on in the episode, that he's quite disgusting. Like, he was touching people's food, he was licking people, very tactile, and pissing in Sherlock's fireplace, quite bodily, but yet also quite cold and clinical and very sterile. And he's kind of a bit of a Murdoch type character. Murdoch
kind of crossed with Hannibal Lecter. I thought a little bit.
His little brother is Hannibal Lecter now. So he was kind of devious, but also a bully. And I think in the final scene, it's one of my favourites in the episode, was when he was flicking John's face. And because he's such a tall man and Freeman's relatively short, it was like he was towering above him and bullying him, and John couldn't do anything.
So I was going to ask you that, actually. Did you have a favourite scene in the episode?
That's one of them, and I think the other one was when we found out that Sherlock was basically just leading the woman along just so he can get into Magnuson's office, even really with dark. The fake proposal. Really, really dark, but I thought it was great stuff.
But for a minute you're worrying that she's some weak damsel in distress, the woman that he's marrying, but so it was really nice that she turned out to be quite a strong character.
And I thought the most interesting part of the episode was the stuff they did with John. Because right at the beginning of the episode, he's having a dream, and he's having flashbacks to him in Afghanistan. And it's very much like the very first episode, studying it in Pink, how it starts. He's having these traumatic episodes, and you feel like, oh God, this guy's got shell shock. He's traumatised by his experiences in war. But you realise it's not. That he misses it. And it's a dream that's a kind of wish fulfillment. That's what he wants in his life, is the excitement. And a lot of stuff in the episode turns on him. Like, you're not the victim in all this, John. You seek these people out, and you're just as bad as them. And you're a thrill seeker. You want the violence and the danger.
Yeah, sure. And I was going to say, my favourite episode was my favourite scene, rather, was a John scene. It was the one where he finally confronts Mary, and they're in Sherlock's apartment, and they sit her down on the seat.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's just the acting, like, he's so good in that scene, and I think that's run through this whole series. It's really been Freeman's series. I think he's been absolutely brilliant in this one.
Yeah, totally.
It was cool that they the drug stuff came in as well. I've been wondering if they were ever going to touch upon that.
Yeah, because in the past, the Sherlock's drug of choice in this series has always been cigarettes, and that was kind of the replacement for cocaine. But him kind of inveigling his way into the crack den, or the heroin den, whatever, is kind of an updated version of Sherlock Holmes going into the opium dens in the kind of source material. And I thought that was great about this episode, is it had those little kind of references to the novels and the short stories, but really updated them, but wasn't enslaved to the source material. So it's a nice little aside, because this is His Last Vow, which is like His Last Bow, which was the very last Sherlock Holmes novel. And there's a line in that book that he goes to Sussex and takes up beekeeping. And that's why you get a lot of fan fiction where he's an old man, he's a beekeeper, and he gets pulled out of retirement. Michael Chabon wrote a novel based on that even.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
right.
And there's a line in the show where she says, I'm moving to Sussex cottage, but it's got bees, but I'm going to get rid of them. So there's lots of nice little lines, but I feel like towards the end of the episode, a lot of that stuff, maybe it felt like you got to the end of Sherlock Holmes as Arthur Conan Doyle had written it. This was the title taken from the last novel. So I feel like they're almost now going towards more Uncharted territory. They've done some of the big stories, and now this is maybe them kind of cutting their own story.
Sure. Well, something else that was new and that I really liked was, and I nearly made a joke about it at the time, when the dude in the drug den who Watson sprained his arm. When he got in the car with them, I was going to make a joke. It wouldn't be funny if he joined up with them, and he bloody did. And he was a really funny character. Like, what an interesting addition to the team.
He's become part of the irregulars.
Yeah, I wonder if he'll stick around.
Totally, yeah.
So let's talk about it in the context of the series, because you touched upon the fact that you didn't love the first 2 episodes. I'm kind of the same. I liked the first one. I thought the second one was a bit average, really. But how do you think they kind of stack up as a sort of hat trick?
Well, in this episode we saw there were certain things that were like little snippets of Mary that were seeds were sown basically in the first couple of episodes for this revelation. But I don't think that excuses the first 2 episodes being kind of a little bit under par, I think. And I think that's by virtue of Sherlock being so exceptionally good. And it was my favourite show that the BBC have done in the last 5 years, without a question.
Yeah.
So I think the first 2 episodes were burdened a little bit by that cliffhanger, because he had to unpack it, otherwise he'd feel like it was rushed and overlooked. So they spent a lot of that first episode dealing with that. Second episode didn't really have a clear through line, I thought, and did a lot of character stuff, which obviously kind of pays off in this episode. But I still think it makes the second episode a little bit weak. But I think it's just a fantastic conclusion. And there's a slight cliffhanger to it, with Moriarty coming back. But I don't think it's like, it's a tantalising cliffhanger.
Yeah, well, I mean, did we find out how Sherlock survived in the end? I still feel like that's
we know what he told to Anderson, which is, if you think about it, is a very probable solution to it. And whether Sherlock, Anderson laughs because why would you ever tell me this? But also, I think there's part of Sherlock, like, there's no solution that's ever going to be really satisfying to that question.
But I wonder if there's more to it, and we're going to find out in the next series, because obviously we've got to find out how Moriarty survived.
We're going to go back to that rooftop.
Yeah.
And whether there's something the way that Moriarty survived that feeds into Sherlock surviving. I don't know. I think that's really hard for them to write themselves out of that, because Sherlock, the world's greatest detective, the most acute observational skills in the world, if a man shoots himself, a couple of feet in front of him, I think Sherlock he'd be able to see if it was faked or not. So that would be really interesting, how they get out of that. Or is Moriarty such a genius that he's been able to plan this in advance of his death? So basically, Sherlock is now chasing ghosts in the 4th season. So all this stuff is set up in motion, but Moriarty's dead. So there's nobody really to catch, which is kind of fiendish in a different way.
So how long are we going to have to wait to see that? Because I believe, didn't Stephen Moffat say something about season 4?
So Stephen Moffat was at a BAFTA preview of the episode the other night, and he said season 4 is definitely happening. And obviously with Cumberbatch and Freeman becoming huge stars now, that's becoming more and more difficult to tie them down with conflicting shooting schedules. But it's definitely happening. And he's also teased that him and Mark Gatiss have planned season 5 as well. So 4 and 5 have been planned out in broad brushstrokes.
And that would be cool if they can plant seeds that are going to kind of come to fruition down the line.
And if they have a date in mind, I think it will really help. I think Sherlock did suffer a bit having that 2-year hiatus.
Yeah.
And I think if we could have it within a year, this time next Christmas, that'd be great.
Yeah, because I was a bit not bothered about another season after the second episode. I was thought, is this show losing it? But now, having just seen that 3rd episode, I'm chomping at the bit now.
I feel like he's going to have that season-long antagonist. Yeah. So each week you can have a kind of self-contained story, but it's all going to link into the Moriarty thing. And how is he still reaching to Sherlock beyond the grave? And I think having that through line will really help the 4th season.
Cool. Well, that's what we thought of Sherlock. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and keep it here on IGN for all your Sherlock needs.